All right, today we're jumping way back in time to meet the intellectual giants of early Christianity. We're going to see how a few brilliant minds took a young, emerging faith and literally built the philosophical foundation that stood for nearly 2,000 years. These are the architects of faith.
So, have you ever stopped to think about where core Christian beliefs actually came from? Things like the Trinity or the nature of Jesus. I mean, they didn't just appear out of thin air, right? No way. They were intensely debated, carefully defined, and fiercely defended by some of the sharpest minds in history. So let's meet the people who built the whole thing. Okay, so our story really kicks off in this incredible period of intellectual energy. You've got this new faith that's just exploding, and it's having to grapple with some of the biggest philosophical questions you can possibly imagine. To kind of get our bearings, let's just look at this timeline for a second. We're focusing on three major players: Origen, Augustine, and Cyril. You can see right away that Origen comes first. He's really the one setting the stage. And then, look at this. Augustine and Cyril are basically contemporaries. Their lives overlap quite a bit, which means they were right in the thick of it, wrestling with some of the exact same theological challenges.
So, first up is Origen. You have to think of him as the great philosophical pioneer. This was the trailblazer who wasn't afraid to take the tools of philosophy and apply them to scripture. He really laid the groundwork for what we now call systematic theology.
Origen was from Alexandria, which at the time was this massive hub of learning and culture, and he was a true scholar's scholar. I mean, get this. His masterpiece, the Hexapla, was this insane project where he laid out 6 different versions of the Old Testament side by side for comparison. That just shows you how deep he went, how committed he was to this rigorous, text-based approach to figuring things out. But here's where Origen really blew the doors open. Long before it was official doctrine, he pioneered the idea of the Trinity. He was the one who put forward this idea that within the one God, there are 3 distinct persons. Now, in a world steeped in strict monotheism, this was a completely radical idea, and it set the stage for centuries of debate to come. Which brings us to our next guy, Augustine of Hippo. Now, if Origen was the pioneer who broke new ground, think of Augustine as the master architect. He's the one who came in and designed some of Christian doctrine's most permanent, influential structures. And Augustine's personal story is just incredible. He wasn't some lifelong believer. He actually spent years on this intense spiritual and intellectual journey, which he famously wrote about in his book Confessions. He only converted when he was 33, and I think that personal struggle, that experience, is what gave his work such a profound depth and made him so unbelievably influential. And you can see his method perfectly right here. Augustine didn't throw out Origen's work, he built on it. He took that foundational idea of 3 persons and just developed it. For Augustine, it wasn't just that there were 3 persons in one God. No, it was that the very nature of God is Trinity. It's a small but really crucial shift. He moved from describing God to defining God. Augustine is also the guy we have to thank for this powerful concept, original sin. He's the one who really hammered out the idea that Adam's disobedience in the Garden of Eden wasn't just a one-time mistake, but that it created this fallen state that's passed down through all of humanity. And that one idea, it would go on to shape basically all of Western Christianity's views on human nature and salvation. And that brings us to our third titan, Cyril of Alexandria. So, if Origen was the pioneer and Augustine was the architect, Cyril was the doctrinal defender. He was a fighter. He stepped into a time of incredible controversy and fought to hammer these core beliefs into official church doctrine. Cyril's main battlefield was something called Christology, basically the study of who Jesus Christ was. And he got tangled up in this huge fight over whether Jesus' divine and human natures were separate things. And look, this wasn't just some dusty academic debate. The question of who was Jesus really had enormous implications for the entire future of the church. And this is where we get a really important term, the hypostatic union. Yeah, it sounds super complex, I know, but it was Cyril's elegant solution. He argued that in the one person of Jesus Christ, 2 complete natures, one fully divine, one fully human, existed together perfectly without getting mixed up or confused. So Jesus wasn't half God and half man, he was, somehow, fully God and fully man at the same time. And guess what? Cyril won. The debate was settled. His position became the foundation for what's known as Chalcedonian Orthodoxy, the official stance of the church. And that single declaration, that Jesus is both fully divine and fully human, has been a central pillar of mainstream Christianity ever since. So let's just zoom out for a minute. We've met the pioneer, the architect, and the defender. When you put all their work together, well, what you get is the very bedrock of Christian theology. When you boil it all down, their contributions really stand on four main pillars. Together, they developed the theology of the Trinity. They established rigorous scriptural study as the main tool for asking questions. They shaped foundational ideas about salvation. And, of course, they solidified the very definition of Jesus' nature. It's just an absolutely incredible intellectual achievement. So why should we care about any of this ancient history today? Well, because their conclusions directly shaped centuries of Western culture, how people worship, and what they believe. Their writings became required reading for pretty much every major thinker that came after them, from Thomas Aquinas all the way to the Protestant reformers. And even now, their arguments are still the key reference points in conversations between different Christian churches. This stuff isn't dead history. Their legacy is very much alive. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. You know, these debates happened over 1,500 years ago, but their conclusions have had this ripple effect through culture, philosophy, even politics. So the question to leave you with is this: where can you still see the echoes of these ancient debates shaping our world today?